I had 45 seconds before the dessert spoons hit the table and the bullets hit his chest. My hand shook just enough to smear the ballpoint ink as I folded the receipt into quarters. The paper felt thinner than tissue, like it might disintegrate before it reached him. Around me, the gilded lotus hummed with the low frequency of wealth, crystal against porcelain, muted laughter, the whisper of silk against leather booth seats. Outside, Chicago's winter wind howled against the floor-to-ceiling windows. But in here, everything was warm, too warm, suffocating. I approached table 1 like I was walking toward my own execution. Kang Ji-hoon sat with his back to the glass wall, the city glittering behind him like a throne of lights. He looked like he'd been carved from marble. Sharp jawline, black hair slicked back, a Tom Ford suit expensive enough to rival my entire year's rent. His hand rested on the table, fingers drumming a slow, predatory rhythm. Beside him, Bianca Moretti leaned in close, whispering something that made her red lips curve into a smile. Her diamond earrings caught the candlelight, throwing fractured rainbows across the white tablecloth. She looked like a woman in love. She wasn't. 20 minutes ago, I'd heard her order his death. I had been threading my way past Rosa Bordeaux in the cellar vault when her voice, sharp, speaking Italian, froze me in place. Vicino al vetro. Yes, he's at table 1 by the glass. The others are in position. 1 at the bar, 3 near the kitchen. Then, her voice had dropped into something faster, sharper, like she was wrapping razor wire around her words. I stood there for 20 seconds after she left, waiting for my legs to remember how to work. Now, as I scanned the room, everything clicked into focus with horrifying clarity. The man at the bar wasn't watching the game, he was watching Ji-hoon. The 3 men by the kitchen weren't ordering. Their hands were tucked inside their jackets. I thought about walking away. I thought about my father in that hospital bed on the south side, hooked up to the steady beep of a life he couldn't feel. But I thought about mercy, unearned and freely given. I couldn't just let someone die. My reflection in the wine glasses looked ghost pale as I reached the table. Time stretched and contracted. I was hyper-aware of the scratch of my polyester uniform and the squeak of my shoes on the marble. "You're Glenfiddich, sir." My voice was steady, professional. I set the crystal glass down, and then I did the one thing a server is trained never to do. I touched him. My thumb pressed against the back of his hand as I slid the folded receipt beneath his coaster. The contact lasted maybe half a second, a violation of every boundary between his world and mine. Ji-hoon's eyes snapped to mine. They were darker than I expected, calculating, the kind of eyes that saw through skin and bone. "Read it," I mouthed. "Please." His fingers curled around the receipt, covering it completely. "Is there a problem with the service, darling?" Bianca's voice cut through the moment, sweet and poisonous. Ji-hoon's expression didn't change. He took a slow sip of whiskey, and with his other hand, unfolded the note beneath the table. "Your fiancé sold you out." They're in position. His jaw tightened, the smallest tell. He set the glass down with a soft clink that seemed to silence the entire restaurant. "I'd like to propose a toast," Ji-hoon said, his voice smooth and controlled. Bianca blinked, her smile flickering. "Now? We haven't even ordered dessert yet." "Now." He gestured to me without looking away from her. "Another glass for my fiancé." "The same." "I already have wine, Ji-hoon," she said, her posture stiffening. "Then you'll have whiskey, too." It wasn't a request. I walked back to the bar on autopilot, my hands trembling so hard the amber liquid nearly spilled. The restaurant continued its expensive symphony, completely unaware that table 1 was a bomb waiting to detonate. I set the glass in front of Bianca. Her red nails gleamed as she reached for it, but Ji-hoon's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with a strength that made her gasp. "Let's switch," he said softly. "I want to drink from your glass, and you drink from mine." The temperature at the table dropped 10 degrees. Bianca's laugh was forced, brittle. "That's weird, even for you." "Is it?" Ji-hoon's smile was a razor. "I thought couples in love shared everything. Trusting. Or is there a reason you don't want to drink what I've been drinking?" The silence stretched. Bianca looked at him, her face cycling through confusion and fury before settling on a carefully blank mask. "Of course not." She picked up his glass with a trembling hand. "To loyalty," Ji-hoon echoed, taking her wine. They drank. Nothing happened. The whiskey wasn't poisoned, but Bianca's hesitation had confirmed the death warrant. Ji-hoon sat back, finally looking directly at me, taking in my name tag and the fear I couldn't hide. "Nora Vance," he read slowly, his accent turning my name into something foreign and dangerous. "Tell me, Nora, do you believe in fate?" My throat closed. I'm not sure, sir." "I didn't either," he said, his eyes moving to the men standing by the kitchen. Until 45 seconds ago. Bianca's face went white. And that's when I realized I'd just started a war. The shift was instantaneous. One moment, the Gilded Lotus was a sanctuary of elite comfort. The next, it was a kill zone. When we go through those doors, Jihoon whispered, his mouth so close to my ear that the heat of his breath made me shiver. To anyone watching, he was merely berating a clumsy waitress. You run left, don't stop, don't look back. He gripped my upper arm with a vice-like strength, his fingers digging into the pulse point at my wrist. He didn't just lead me, he propelled me. Behind us, I heard Bianca's voice, sharp and frantic, trying to maintain the facade for the other diners. Jihoon, don't be ridiculous, just send her home. I'm going to speak to her manager. Jihoon's voice cut through the room like a blade. And then I'm going to have her fired. We were 10 feet from the kitchen doors when the world ended. The doors swung open, and the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room whole, not a gradual flicker, but an absolute, suffocating void. The jazz quartet died mid-note. Crystal glasses hit the floor in cascading crashes, and a woman's scream pierced the sudden silence. Then, the emergency lighting kicked in. Dim, blood-red bulbs flickered to life, turning the industrial kitchen into a nightmare landscape of crimson shadows. Left, Jihoon roared. I ran. My cheap work shoes skidded on the slick tile as I bolted past the prep stations and the industrial ovens radiating heat like open furnaces. Behind me came the sound of impact, flesh on flesh, a grunt of pain, and the metallic skitter of a weapon across the floor. I risked a glance back. Jihoon fought like violence was a language he'd spoken since birth. A man in a white chef's coat lunged at him with a blade meant for carving, but Jihoon caught his wrist, twisted, and drove his elbow into the man's throat with surgical precision. He spun the body into a second attacker, both men crashing into a rack of stainless steel pans. The girl, a voice shouted in accented English. Grab the girl. 3 more men burst through the swinging doors, wearing kitchen whites as camouflage. Terror shot through me like electricity. I was cornered near the range. I grabbed the first thing my hand found, a heavy pan of hot oil sitting on the burner. Without thinking, I hurled it. The oil caught the lead man across the face and chest. His screams were inhuman, primal, as he dropped to his knees, clawing at his burning skin. The smell hit me, scorched flesh and hot metal, and my stomach tried to climb up my throat. Move, Nora. Jihoon was suddenly beside me, his hand finding the small of my back, propelling me through another set of doors into the dry storage area. We were surrounded by 50-pound bags of rice and flour stacked floor to ceiling, creating a maze of narrow passages. He pulled me into a gap between the shelving units, pressing us both flat against the concrete wall. The space was so narrow that my chest was crushed against his, my face buried in the blood-stained fabric of his Tom Ford shirt. He smelled of expensive cologne, copper, and adrenaline. How many? I whispered, my breath fogging against his chest. Too many, he replied, his voice barely audible, his lips brushing the top of my head. The kitchen is full of them. This wasn't just a hit, this was an occupation. Footsteps thundered nearby. 3 men entered the storage area, their shadows stretching grotesquely across the walls in the red light. They moved methodically, weapons drawn. They wanted this quiet. Jihoon's arm wrapped around my waist, holding me so still I wasn't sure I was breathing. His other hand moved to his ankle, and when it came back up, a small, black pistol glinted in the crimson gloom. The nearest man was 5 feet away. 4, 3. I could see the scar bisecting his eyebrow. He was looking right at our hiding spot. Jihoon's finger rested on the trigger, his body coiled like a spring. Then, glass shattered in the kitchen, followed by shouting in Korean. The man's head whipped toward the sound. He gestured to his companions, and they retreated toward the noise. Jihoon exhaled, the breath moving through his chest and expanding against mine. Your people? I whispered. My people, he said, pulling back to put an inch of space between us. His face was carved from stone, a cut above his eyebrow leaking blood down his cheek. He looked like a nightmare. They'll create a distraction, but we need to move. Now, we spun as a massive figure blocked the path to the rear exit, backlit by the red emergency glow. He was built like a mountain, and his gun was pointed directly at my head. On, Jihoon said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. Sorry, boss, the man said, his expression neutral. Orders from the top. Juno sends his regards. Nothing personal. The man's finger tightened on the trigger. Ji-hoon moved faster than physics should have allowed. He grabbed a bag of rice from the shelf and hurled it. The bag exploded on impact, sending white grains everywhere like a blizzard in the red light. The man fired blind. The report was deafening in the enclosed space. Down, Ji-hoon tackled me, his body covering mine as bullets punched through the rice bags above us. Wood splintered, metal pinged, and a rain of white powder cascaded down on us like snow. Stay down, he growled against my ear. He rolled off me, returning fire. The muzzle flashes lit up the room in strobing bursts of white. The mountain of a man went down, clutching his shoulder. The back door, now, he yanked me to my feet. We ran, stumbling through rice that crunched beneath our shoes. Ji-hoon hit the metal industrial door at full speed, using his shoulder as a battering ram. It exploded open, and we burst out into the freezing Chicago night. Chicago's winter slammed into us like a freight train. The temperature was below zero, the wind screaming through the alley with enough force to steal the breath from my lungs. My server uniform, a thin polyester blouse and slacks, was criminally inadequate. Within seconds, the wind turned my sweat into a layer of ice against my skin. Ji-hoon didn't slow down. He pulled me toward the mouth of the alley where a black SUV sat idling, its exhaust creating ghostly plumes in the freezing air. He wrenched open the back door and physically threw me inside before diving in after me. Drive, he barked in Korean. As the SUV lurched forward, tires spinning on the ice before finding purchase, I looked back through the spider-webbed, bulletproof rear window. Figures spilled out of the restaurant's exit, weapons raised, but they were already fading into a blur of white snow and muzzle flashes. Inside the vehicle, the silence was oppressive. Ji-hoon leaned forward, speaking rapid-fire instructions to the driver. Blood dripped from the cut above his eye, spattering on the black leather seat. I looked down at myself. I was covered in rice grains and dust, my arm burning where a bullet had grazed the fabric of my sleeve. "You're hurt," Ji-hoon said, his attention snapping back to me. His English was perfect, accented only by the gravity of the situation. "I'm fine. You're bleeding." "It's nothing." He reached out, his fingers examining the graze on my arm with a clinical detachment that felt strangely intimate. "You were lucky." "Lucky?" I let out a sharp, hysterical laugh. "I just burned a man's face off and got shot at in a storage room." "That's your definition of lucky?" "You're alive," he countered, his dark eyes meeting mine. "That's the only definition that matters." The SUV wound through the city, bypassing the bright lights of the magnificent mile for the desolate industrial zones near the lake. We passed through two separate security checkpoints, each requiring retinal scans and encrypted codes. Finally, we pulled into an underground garage that looked like it could house a small military. "Where are we?" I asked, my voice trembling as the adrenaline began to crash. "Somewhere they won't look tonight," he said, exiting the car. Home. Home was a brutalist penthouse that felt more like a fortress than a residence. It sat on a promontory overlooking Lake Michigan, all concrete and glass with harsh, uncompromising lines. The elevator required a fingerprint scan and a key card. As we ascended, Ji-hoon noticed me shaking. He shrugged off his ruined suit jacket and draped it over my shoulders. It was still warm from his body, smelling of copper and expensive cologne. The elevator doors opened directly into a living space that looked like a monochromatic museum, gray concrete floors, steel fixtures, and abstract charcoal art. Three men in tactical gear straightened as we entered. Ji-hoon barked a series of orders, and two of them vanished immediately. The third approached me, his hand outstretched. "Phone," Ji-hoon translated. "What? Why?" I pulled the jacket tighter around me. "I need to call my father. He'll be worried." "Your father is fine. I had my people check on him 20 minutes ago. He's asleep in his hospital bed, completely unaware his daughter is in the middle of a war." Ji-hoon's voice was flat, final. "The phone, Nora, now." I placed the device in the guard's palm. He disappeared, leaving me alone in the vast, cold space with the man I had just saved. "You can't keep me here," I said, trying to find the defiance that had allowed me to throw that pan of oil. "Can't I?" Ji-hoon poured amber liquid into a crystal glass, regarding me over the rim. "What is your alternative? Walk out into the snow and hope Bianca Moretti doesn't find you? Go back to your apartment and wait for Juno to put a bullet through your door? You saved my life. In my world, that makes you either very valuable or very dangerous. Sometimes both." He stopped inches from me, close enough that I could see the gold flecks in his dark irises. You aren't going home, Nora. Not tonight. Not until I figure out how to keep you alive without you becoming a liability. He gestured toward a hallway. Third door on the right. There's a bathroom and clean clothes. Take your time, we have a long night ahead. I fled toward the room, the click of my heels echoing off the concrete. I locked the door behind me, but as I caught my ghost-pale reflection in the mirror, I realized the lock was a lie. This was his kingdom, and I was just a subject he hadn't decided whether to protect or destroy. I woke to the sound of alarms screaming through the concrete fortress. Red emergency lights strobed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the gray living room into a landscape of flickering blood. I bolted upright on the guest bed, heart hammering against my ribs. The door slammed open, and Ji-hoon filled the frame. He was no longer the elegant man in the Tom Ford suit. He was dressed in full tactical gear, a matte black rifle slung across his chest. Get up, now, he barked. What's happening? I thought we were safe. I stumbled out of bed, still wearing the oversized thermal shirt he'd provided. We're compromised. They're on the perimeter. He grabbed my wrist, dragging me toward the elevator. In the garage, the calm museum-like atmosphere was gone, replaced by the roar of engines and the clatter of weapons. Ji-hoon's men were loading crates into SUVs with practiced, silent speed. Ji-hoon stopped abruptly, his eyes fixed on a man in a white lab coat holding a tablet. They spoke in rapid Korean, their voices rising. Then, Ji-hoon's gaze swung to me, and what I saw there turned my blood to ice. It wasn't protection. It was a cold, calculating suspicion. You, he said softly, and the softness was more terrifying than a shout. You led them here. What? No, I haven't talked to anyone. Search her, he ordered. Two men approached, their hands professional and impersonal as they patted me down. Clear, one reported. Then how? Ji-hoon grabbed my shoulders, his grip like iron. How did they find us, Nora? Who did you call? What did you do? Nothing. You took my phone. I've been locked in that room. I felt the sting of tears, born of rage and terror. You're the one who dragged me here. The man with the tablet approached, holding up the screen. It showed a map of the city with a pulsing red dot centered exactly on our coordinates. He held up an evidence bag containing a small, cardboard box. My heart stopped. It was the pharmaceutical box I'd picked up during my lunch break. When did you last see your father? Ji-hoon hissed. Yesterday, I picked up his medication. I had it in my purse. Your purse? Ji-hoon echoed, his jaw tightening. Which was in the car we took from the restaurant. The insulin was in your purse, Nora. They tagged the medication days ago, Ji-hoon realized, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. They weren't just planning to kill me, they were tagging anyone who might be a loose end. They bet you'd have it with you, and you led them straight to my primary safe house like a bloodhound. I didn't know, I whispered, the weight of the realization crushing me. I swear, I didn't know. Do you have any idea how many people are dead right now because you didn't know? Ji-hoon laughed, a broken, jagged sound. He pulled a handgun from his holster and pressed the cold barrel against my forehead. Give me one reason why I shouldn't end this right now. The garage was silent. His men didn't move. I looked into his obsidian eyes and saw the monster the world had told me he was. But beneath the terror, a spark of defiance lit up. Because my father didn't ask for any of this, I snapped, leaning into the barrel. Because he's lying in a bed on 42nd Street with a machine breathing for him. You can kill me, Ji-hoon. It'll make you feel better for exactly 5 seconds. But it won't stop Bianca. It won't bring your men back. And before you pull that trigger, you better send someone to room 304 to give James Vance his shot, because he's the only innocent person in this entire mess. We stared at each other, both breathing hard, the gun a heavy weight between us. For a moment, I was sure he'd do it. Then, he lowered the weapon. The tracker's been destroyed. We're clean, he said to his men, though his eyes never left mine. He turned to the driver. Change of plans. We're going to the hospital on 42nd Street. What? Why? I gasped. Because you're right, he said, moving toward the SUV. And because I don't like leaving my property unprotected. From now on, your father's life is my leverage. Which means I own you, Nora. Not because I'm cruel, but because that's the only way you survive. The drive to the hospital was a blur of high-speed turns and hushed Korean commands over the radio. I sat in the back of the SUV, my heart still racing from the cold metal of the gun that had been pressed against my forehead. I looked at Ji-hoon. He was staring out the window, his jaw tight, his reflection in the glass looking more like a vengeful god than a man. When we arrived at the hospital on 42nd Street, the atmosphere was different. There were no sirens, no flashing lights, only 4 black sedans already parked in the ambulance bay. Men in dark suits stood at every entrance, their hands clasped in front of them, ears tuned to earpieces. "Why are your men here?" I asked, a new kind of dread pooling in my stomach. "I told you," Ji-hoon said, opening the door. "I protect my assets." He led me through the lobby. The staff didn't stop us. In fact, the night manager bowed as we passed. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor, but we didn't stop at the nurse's station. We headed straight for room 304. Inside, my father, James Vance, lay exactly as I had left him, gray-haired, frail, his chest rising and falling with the rhythmic hiss of the ventilator. But the room had changed. New monitors hummed with advanced graphics, and a private nurse stood at the bedside, adjusting in 4 drip. "What did you do?" I whispered, moving to my father's side. "I bought his medical debt 3 months ago," Ji-hoon said, standing at the foot of the bed. "This hospital? It's mine. It has been for years. Money laundering, shell companies, the usual. But it serves a purpose tonight." I turned to him, my eyes wide. "You've owned his care this whole time?" "Why, strategy," he replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "I knew who you were before you ever slipped me that note, Nora. I knew about the waitress whose father was a casualty of a mob-related hit-and-run 2 years ago. I kept him alive because I thought you might eventually be useful. I just didn't expect you to prove it so spectacularly." The relief I felt at my father's safety was suddenly curdled by the realization of my own entrapment. "You bastard, you've been holding him over my head before I even knew you existed, and I'm the bastard keeping him breathing," he countered. "Every breath he takes is currency in a debt you can never repay. Bianca Moretti knows this now. She knows he is my greatest leverage over you, and you are my greatest witness against her." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming the small room. "I have moved him to a private suite on the top floor. He will have round-the-clock security and the best doctors money can buy. But understand this, if you run, if you betray me, the funding stops. The machines go quiet." "You wouldn't," I breathed. "I am a monster, Nora. Don't forget that just because I bandaged your arm." He turned to the private nurse. "Make sure he receives the specialized insulin immediately. No more tagged boxes." As we left the room, the weight of the concrete sanctuary felt heavier than ever. I wasn't just his responsibility, I was his property. But as I looked back at my father's stable monitors, I knew I had no choice. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, my voice finally steady. Ji-hoon looked at me, a microscopic flash of respect crossing his dark eyes. "I need you to tell me every word you heard in that cellar. Every name, every date, because tomorrow, we stop playing defense." The basement of the stronghold smelled of gun oil, cold concrete, and old secrets. Ji-hoon led me there at dawn, the gray light of the lake barely touching the high, barred windows. He had shed the tactical gear for a simple black Henley that showed the tension in his shoulders. "If you're going to survive what's coming," he said, clearing a space on a heavy steel table, "you need to know how to protect yourself. My guards are a shield, Nora, but shields can break." He placed a compact 9mm pistol on the table. It looked small, but in the silence of the room, it carried the weight of an anchor. "Pick it up," he commanded. I hesitated. My hands, usually steady enough for 4 starts and blood draws, trembled. "I'm a nursing student. I'm supposed to heal people, not. In this world, you heal the people you love by stopping the people who want to hurt them." He moved behind me, his chest pressing against my back. His arms came around mine, guiding my hands toward the weapon. "Your stance is wrong. Feet shoulder-width apart. Bend your knees. You're too rigid." His touch was clinical yet electric, a sharp contrast to the cold metal in my palm. He repositioned my fingers, his skin warm against mine. "Control your breathing," he murmured against my ear. "In through the nose, out through the mouth. You don't pull the trigger. You squeeze." The shot should happen on the exhale, in the space between heartbeats. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to find that space. When I opened them, I focused on the paper silhouette downrange. I exhaled, feeling the air leave my lungs, and squeezed. The report was deafening. The kickback jolted my wrists, and the bullet punched a hole in the concrete 3 feet to the left of the target. Better than I expected for a first shot, Jihoon said, his voice dropping an octave. He didn't pull away. Instead, he stayed close, his hands lingering on my arms. Again. We spent the next hour in that rhythm. Every time I missed, he corrected my form. Every time I hit closer to the center, I felt a strange, dark thrill. I wasn't just learning to shoot, I was learning to shed the girl who waited for permission to exist. You're a fast learner, he said, finally stepping back to let me reload the magazine. I'm a desperate learner, I corrected. Now, tell me why we're doing this today. You heard something, didn't you? Jihoon's expression shifted, the teacher replaced by the strategist. He pulled up a file on a nearby tablet. My scouts intercepted a shipment. Bianca Moretti and Juno aren't just merging their territories. They've moved the wedding up. It's happening in 3 days. The wedding? I asked, my heart sinking. The one I heard them talking about in the cellar? Exactly. It's not a celebration, it's a coronation. If they complete that ceremony, Juno becomes the legitimate head of the combined families. I'll be an outlaw in my own city. He looked at me, his obsidian eyes unreadable. You said you heard Italian fragments in the cellar, matrimonio anticipato. You gave us the when. Now I need you to help me with the how. You want me to go there, I realized, the weight of the pistol suddenly feeling like lead. I need you to be my eyes inside, he said, his voice soft but demanding. They've seen you as a waitress, they won't recognize the woman I've spent the last 3 days creating. The strategy room was bathed in the blue light of high-resolution monitors. Jihoon sat hunched over a guest list that looked more like a target manifest. On the wall, a satellite image of the Moretti estate, a sprawling, fortress-like manor in the suburbs, was highlighted with red zones indicating sniper nests and thermal cameras. They aren't just merging bloodlines, Jihoon said, his voice cold as he scrolled through the documents. Juno has drafted a unity contract. It's a legal shell designed to absorb my family's assets into the Moretti syndicate the moment the vows are exchanged. It's a hostile takeover disguised as a sacrament. I stood by the window, watching the snow lash against the glass. You're going to stop the wedding. I'm going to destroy it, he corrected. He turned the screen toward me, showing a dress, a stunning, midnight blue gown of heavy silk. You'll enter as the guest of a high-ranking Korean investor. My people have spent the last 48 hours building your identity from the ground up. You are no longer Nora Vance, the waitress. You are the daughter of a shipping magnate from Busan. Why me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You have soldiers for this. Soldiers are expected, Jihoon said, standing and walking toward me. A beautiful woman in a designer gown is a distraction. While they are focused on you, my team will infiltrate the server room beneath the chapel. We need to intercept the digital signature of that contract before it hits the international banks. He stopped in front of me, his presence filling the space. He reached out, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw, a gesture that was becoming dangerously familiar. And you have something the soldiers don't. You have the memory of Bianca's voice. You'll be able to tell if she's deviating from the plan I overheard. I looked at the gun on the table, then back at him. And if she sees me? If she remembers the girl from the Gilded Lotus? She won't, he promised, because by the time you walk through those doors, you won't even recognize yourself. He handed me a small, encrypted earpiece, no larger than a grain of rice. 3 days, Nora. We have 3 days to turn a nursing student into a spy. If we fail, the machines in room 304 go dark. If we succeed, we take back the city. The weight of the choice settled in my gut. I wasn't just his responsibility anymore. I was his secret weapon. The Moretti estate was a monument to old-world arrogance, all golden stone, sprawling gardens, and a perimeter guarded by men who looked like they were waiting for a war. Inside the black sedan, the air was thick with the scent of my perfume and the cold reality of the pistol hidden against my thigh. I looked at my reflection. Professional makeup had sharpened my features, the midnight blue silk of the gown draped over me like liquid armor. Beneath the bodice, I felt the stiffness of the ballistic weave Jihoon had insisted on. Remember, Jihoon's voice crackled in my ear, steady and grounded. You are the ghost in their machine. Walk like you own the room, and they won't dare question why you're in it. I stepped out of the car, my heels clicking on the gravel. The grand ballroom was a sea of designer silk and hushed conversations. Bianca Moretti stood near the altar of the makeshift chapel, her white lace wedding gown shimmering like a shroud. She was radiant, smiling at the guests, but her eyes remained restless, scanning, calculating. I moved through the crowd, a glass of untouched champagne in my hand. Every muscle in my body was coiled. To my right, I spotted the man from the bar, the one who hadn't finished his scotch. He was now in a tuxedo, a earpiece tucked discreetly into his collar. Target spotted at 10 o'clock, I whispered into my own mic. Copy, Ji-hoon replied. Team is in the service tunnels, 30 seconds to the server room. Keep Bianca's attention away from the north corridor. I made my way toward the front, weaving past wealthy investors and mob royalty. As I approached, Bianca's gaze finally landed on me. For a terrifying heartbeat, her eyes narrowed. The air in my lungs turned to lead. Do I know you? She asked, her voice like a velvet-wrapped blade. My father is a partner of the Khan family's Busan shipping interests, I said, my voice smooth, exactly as we had practiced. I believe we were on the guest list for the original date. Bianca smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Ah, the Korean faction. I'm surprised any of you showed up, considering your king is currently a fugitive. Power shifts, Ms. Moretti, I replied, tilting my head. We prefer to be on the side that's winning. Smart girl, she murmured. Just then, the lights flickered, a momentary dip in power. A ripple of confusion went through the room. Bianca's posture stiffened. She looked toward the north corridor, her hand instinctively moving toward the bouquet she held. The server room, she hissed to a guard nearby. Check it, now, don't let them move, Nora, Ji-hoon's voice commanded. I didn't think. I stepped into her personal space, feigning a trip, and spilled the champagne directly down the front of her white lace gown. The gasp from the room was audible. Bianca let out a low, guttural snarl of fury. You clumsy little, I am so sorry, I cried, grabbing a napkin and dabbing at the silk, effectively pinning her in place. The lights, I lost my footing. For 10 seconds, the most dangerous woman in the city was occupied with a stain, while in the tunnels below, I heard the frantic typing of Ji-hoon's hackers. We're in, Ji-hoon whispered. Contract intercepted. Get out of there, Nora, now. But as I looked up from Bianca's dress, I saw a familiar face entering the ballroom, Juno, and he wasn't looking at the bride. He was looking straight at me. The ballroom froze. Juno pushed through the crowd, his eyes locking onto mine with the cold precision of a predator who finally recognizes the scent of his prey. The waitress, he said, his voice a low growl that cut through the gasps of the guests. You didn't kill her, Bianca. You let a common servant into our house. Bianca's face shifted from irritation over her dress to a mask of lethal realization. Her hand dove into her bouquet, but I was faster. I didn't reach for my gun, not yet. I stepped back, putting the marble altar between us as the ballroom erupted into chaos. Now, Nora, Ji-hoon's voice exploded in my ear. The floor-to-ceiling windows shattered as Ji-hoon and his tactical team breached the estate. The coronation turned into a battlefield in a heartbeat. Guests scrambled for the exits while the two syndicates turned the chapel into a kill zone. Juno raised his weapon, pointing it directly at my chest. I didn't flinch. I remembered the basement, the smell of gun oil, and the art of the exhale. I pulled the pistol from my thigh holster and fired. The shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his gun skittering across the marble floor. You're a fast learner. Ji-hoon's voice came from the smoke as he emerged, his rifle raised. He didn't look at the soldiers, he looked at me. Bianca lunged for the fallen weapon, but I intercepted her, tackling her into the white roses that lined the altar. We struggled, the white silk of her wedding dress tearing as we fought for the blade hidden in her bodice. She was strong, fueled by a year of planning that was currently burning around her. You were supposed to be nothing, she hissed, her fingers clawing at my face. I was a waitress, I said, my voice cold and steady as I twisted her arm back. Now, I'm the one ending this. I found the handle of her own stiletto blade and drove it home. She gasped, her eyes going wide with the shock of a woman who never believed she could be touched by someone like me. She crumpled into the red-stained roses, the life fading from her eyes. Silence descended on the room as Ji-hoon's men secured the remaining Moretti soldiers. Juno lay clutching his shoulder, defeated and broken at the feet of the man he tried to replace. Ji-hoon walked toward me, stepping over the ruined lace of the wedding gown. He reached out, his hand steady as he wiped a streak of Bianca's blood from my cheek. It's over, he said. The contract is erased. The Moretti line ends here. And my father? I asked, the adrenaline finally leaving my body, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. James Vance is being moved to the penthouse as we speak, Ji-hoon replied, his voice softening. He woke up 10 minutes ago, Nora. He's asking for his daughter. Resolution. 3 months later, the Gilded Lotus was under new management, mine. I stood on the balcony of the penthouse, watching the Chicago skyline. I wasn't a nursing student anymore, and I certainly wasn't a waitress. I was the partner to the man who ruled the city's shadows. My father lived in the East Wing, receiving the best care in the world, finally free of the debt that had nearly buried us. Ji-hoon stepped out onto the balcony, his hand finding the small of my back. He didn't look at me as a servant or a responsibility, he looked at me as his equal. Regrets? He asked, the winter wind howling around us. Only that I didn't slip you that note sooner, I replied. I had once been invisible, a girl who served appetizers to monsters. Now, I was the one who made them bow. The war was over, but as I looked into Ji-hoon's obsidian eyes, I knew our story was only just beginning.